The Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus put another parable before them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is larger than all the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches." He told them another parable. "The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour till it was leavened. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy, he goes and he sells all that he has and he buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who on finding one pearl of great value, went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and gathered fish of every kind. When it was full, men drew it ashore and sat down and sorted the good into containers, but threw the bad away. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." "Have you understood these things?" They said to him, "Yes." And he said to them, "Therefore every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who brings out his treasure, what is new and what is old." The word of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. Well, we are bombarded with wonderful messages today. Of course, I'd love to talk to you about Romans chapter 8. That's important in my life and the life of my family. Beautiful passage of reassurance to remind us that there's no escaping Jesus. There's no escaping God's love for us. And of course, people might say, well, that's a nice thought, but doesn't Matthew tell us just the exact opposite? Doesn't Matthew tell us that we need to go and seek out Jesus? We have to make sure that we're giving it our all at all times in order to make sure that we actually earn God's affection, earn God's love. That doesn't sound like a gospel to me. Jesus, of course, would have been approached by similar thinking in his day. And what thinking is true then is true now. There are things that change. We can get from point A to point B a little bit faster than we could in Jesus' day. We have access to more stories and more insights than people did in Jesus' day. And of course, we all face temptations wrapped up in new garments and new clothing today. But when we dig deeper, we find that they're the same stories, the same preoccupations, the same addictions, the same lies the world tries to feed us. Lies that are not built necessarily on someone out there trying to pull the wool over our eyes, but on our own human hearts trying to tell us, well, this is the way the world really operates. Yes, I know you hear the promises of Jesus, but you really can't take those to the bank. And so while we may be able to get to point A, point B faster, we still need to travel and take our time arriving at certain destinations. While we may have access to many stories in the world, there's one story that is true through all time. And human nature doesn't really change. The central story of human nature is how we confuse ourselves with God, how we imagine that we are going to be the center of the universe. And trust me, a lot of us are going to be very disappointed when we find out we're not at the end of all things. But what's true for some people all of the time is, of course, true for all of us some of the time. And this story, these series of parables, are Jesus trying to reorient our seeing, our vision, our following, our discipleship away from our ambitions, our works, our perceptions, and towards Him and Him alone. So let's go through this. We're going to read these parables, and then we're going to shift our focus a little bit. And then finally, we will hear what Christ really asks of you and me. Now, these parables seem to fit this particular vision, which we ourselves, honestly, don't fully understand. For the things Jesus talks about are absurd. When we think about what are the most important things in life, we always think about what are the biggest things in life. I can't believe I'm making reference to this, but it's weird how thoughts just pop into your mind and you have to go ahead and say them. Does anybody remember the old movie Men in Black? I remember one of the characters, the dog, saying that the galaxy was on this particular band, on a particular cat. That the galaxy was there. And of course, the humans can't understand it. And what does the dog tell them? You humans, you're always obsessed with, you think things that have to be important. If they're important, they have to be big. We don't really change. Whether it's a Hollywood movie from a few years ago or Jesus talking to people 2,000 years ago, we equate bigness with importance. We think that in order to have power, in order to have influence, and therefore the subtle shift, in order to be faithful, we have to be large and growing. A family that is small is no less a family than a family that is large, and the same thing is true of God's church wherever it may be planted. And so Jesus knows the story of his people. In Daniel chapter 4, he knows how Nebuchadnezzar had this image of a great tree that towered over all the peoples of the world. He's familiar with Ezekiel. In Ezekiel, I think chapter 17, Ezekiel talks about how there will be a great tree that will stand over all of the earth, and everyone will be gathered underneath that great tree. And so when the people come out to see Jesus, they're expecting a celebrity. He's a celebrity preacher, and what do celebrity preachers talk about? How big and important they are. And their ministry is, and Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, the smallest of the seeds. And yet when it is planted, not only does it become the largest seed in the garden, but then people look out the window and they see that it's growing even larger than it should be growing. Of course, the mustard seed is small and grows large, but now they are encountering a Jack and the Beanstalk kind of problem in their backyard, and they're wondering exactly what they're supposed to do about this. The kingdom of heaven, small and unobserved in that Roman Empire, would one day overshadow it, take root, and take over. Many gardeners in the ancient world were actually afraid of mustard seeds because they could take over just like that. Or maybe the kingdom of heaven is like a little bit of yeast. Of course, they didn't know about yeast at this time. Kingdom of heaven is like a little bit of leaven. the sourdough starter that the woman has over in the corner in her pantry that she adds to 3 measures. And we all think, well, that's nice. That's a nice little illustration, until you understand what is meant by 3 measures. 3 measures may be referencing back when Abraham and Sarah are welcoming those 3 strangers. And Abraham calls to take 3 measures of flour and make bread for them so he can break bread with the Trinity. But if you're just looking at it at face value, when we think of 3 measures, we think of 3 equal parts. The funny thing is just how absurd that is. No, it's not 3 equal parts. The Greek word actually means that if you were to take those 3 parts, it would work out to about 6 gallons worth of dough. This little bitty thing, this little bitty leaven, Jesus says is hidden in 6 gallons of 50 pounds of flour kneaded and baked. Enough for 100 or 150 or 200 people. Who is this woman baking for? What is she preparing? There must be some feast on the horizon. After all, that's why she's hidden that leaven inside the flour, to make so much bread for such a feast. Of course, we could go on and on asking questions about that. But Jesus doesn't stop there. Again, switching gears, the kingdom of heaven is a treasure hidden in the field. The kingdom of heaven is a pearl that is sold and someone sees its value. These conclude the second parables. In the ancient world with no real banks, the best way to ensure that you didn't lose your money was to hide it in a field. Oftentimes before battles, the peasants would go and hide their belongings underneath the field until the battle was over, and then go dig them up if they were still around. And if they weren't, archaeologists would find them years later and write papers on them. Merchants looking for a good buy are just like merchants today, hoping to find that diamond in a rough, or maybe a pearl in the rough this time around. And so the point of the first is talking about and focusing on how the hiddenness of the kingdom grows. And the second part is talking about how the kingdom, it takes someone with especially perceptive vision to see a kingdom where the kingdom isn't truly visible, where the kingdom is hidden. Finally, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and gathered fish of every kind. At the end of the age, the fish will be sorted. This last phrase, gnashing of teeth, is something that's lost on us. And for the longest time, I thought what gnashing of teeth meant was this sense of regret, of missing the boat, as it were. But in reality, gnashing of teeth in the Old Testament, when it's used, is enemies who are so angry that things didn't work out the way they planned. You and I know that the world doesn't understand the kingdom logic. Heck, we don't even understand the kingdom logic sometimes. The world gnashes its teeth at the unfairness of it all. The devil had us dead to rights. We know the mistakes that we have made even today, and we're just getting started. And yet the unfairness of the kingdom causes the world in all its cruel logic to gnash its teeth at the unfairness of grace. Have you understood all these things, by the way? You don't have to nod along. Perhaps the most comical thing in this whole illustration, besides the ridiculousness of the size of batches of bread and the mustard seeds being sown here and there, perhaps the most ridiculous thing is the response of those who hear Jesus. Have you understood these things? Yes, of course we understand it. We understand all about grace. until it's the only thing you've got, until you can no longer rely on your own strength, until you have stopped and come to the end of all your work and thinking and worrying and realizing that no one and nothing can get you out of the predicament that you have. Then you realize you didn't understand the stories just as much as you thought you did. And who is this person at the center? The world and worldly thinking, and many commentators, unfortunately, would like us to believe that the people at the center are you and me. We have to understand, we have to see the kingdom. We have to understand how it's growing. You and I have to will and search and work our way into justification. There is a minority opinion, and usually I don't go with the minority opinions. Usually the majority opinions are majorities for a reason. And far be it from me to tell these great scholars that they've gotten it wrong, but let me just say I'm going to put a little bit of an asterisk next to all these thinkers. I may be proud, I may be arrogant, but at least I have the good sense and humility to understand that I don't know everything when a scholar reads Scripture. The person at the center of all of these parables is Jesus. Because Jesus saw things we don't see. When the crowd was expecting a mighty kingdom to come and for God to redeem Israel on a horse with all the multitudes of heaven, he sent his son to die on a cross. When everyone was looking for the glitz and the glamour of the celebrities of the ancient world, God sent a carpenter who we are told had nothing about him that would distinguish him. And when we think at the end of the age that we need to worry that we will not be gathered up into God's kingdom, God sends his angels to scoop us off from the bottoms of this world and gather us together. At the center of this story is not you and I and our work, but Christ and Christ alone. And that is very good news. The peculiarity of Christianity is the fact that it doesn't require you or I to go on a great vision quest. It doesn't require saints of great spiritual discipline, although you can do those things. Instead, it gathers in people that the world doesn't notice. It sees a kingdom where you and I may just see barren ground or a whole bunch of flour. And so Christ is the one who calls, gathers, and enlightens us, and sends his Spirit to reassure us. Have you understood all these things? No. You'll spend the rest of your life trying to understand what it was that God saw that you possibly can't see with your limited vision. But the good news is, what do we do after this? Knowing that it is Christ who does all this work. You and I have his Spirit in us, at least if the book of Acts is to be believed. And when you and I have his Spirit, we can begin to see the world as he sees it, not as the world sees itself. We begin to see other people not just as impediments to our own enlightenment or self-betterment, but rather as people for whom God came and died and rose again. You and I can see the church as more than just a place where people huddle together on Sunday mornings, but rather as the starting off point, the launching pad that God uses daily to accomplish his mission in the world. And you and I can see a mission field where once all we saw was the daily grind. And with that, we should be hopeful, because none of us are doing this on our own. We're just following after Jesus. Jesus has already done this. Jesus has already accomplished this. All you get to do is kind of repeat. All of us have had to do those projects in life where we just wish someone would show us how to do it. Well, I have good news for you. That is the gospel message. You don't have to do anything new, improvise, innovate. You just have to follow Jesus. And so Jesus puts these parables before his people. And he wants us to hear them with spirit, his spirit, to see that the kingdom is actually here, that it's of a great prize, and at the end of all things, we will be gathered to him. These are the gospel promises. And when you and I understand these things, you and I can stop putting ourselves at the center of the story and follow Jesus on his mission. Amen.